Chapter 2. Becoming Someone Dangerous. This is where it starts getting sharp. Two dragons had built something ordinary, stable, domestic, predictable, not bad, not dramatic, just flat. And on the surface, that should have been enough. Work, routine, shared space, no fires to put out, no wars to fight. It should have been enough. And that's the trap. That word right there. Enough. Enough for who? And when the external goes calm for someone like Danny, the internal doesn't rest. This is where people who've never lived like this won't understand. It wakes up. He didn't know it at the time. Couldn't have named it if you asked him. But this was the period where the inside started assembling itself without permission. That's a dangerous sentence, by the way. That's how you know something real is happening. The battlefields were obvious now. Conflicts playing themselves out, creating fresh trenches and war zones. Arguments that never finished. Power struggles that never got resolved. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just constant friction. Language and influence started planting seeds. This is where the architecture starts, whether anyone notices or not. And separately, knowledge began accumulating. Crude insights, half-truths, observations, scraps of psychology, street logic, survival rules, instincts, all of it gathered without a system. Scrolls scattered into a trunk. No order, no map, raw materials, no blueprint yet. Humor was forming too. Raw, open, uncontained. More like testing humor in the dark to see which ones made the fear back off. If you know, you know. Faith was there as well, but only as imprint, childhood Christianity, traveler's superstition, symbols without structure, belief without architecture, power with nowhere to sit. And the beasts, they were already roaming. No containment, no walls, no structure, just unexplained traumas and ghosts prowling the plains, snapping when they could, growling in the night, taking pieces wherever there was weakness. Nothing evil, just ungoverned. This wasn't madness, this was unbuilt architecture. And B, without either of them realizing it, had collided with that process at exactly the right moment. Not explosively, implosively. That's the difference. The relationship dissolved. It felt almost mutually, quiet, like something that never quite ignited in the first place. Just done. That's rarer than people think. And that's important. Because what comes next isn't what people expect. Because what followed wasn't grief. It was hunger. Chaos started calling again. Not because life was bad, but because it was still. And for a dragon with pressure tolerance wired into his bones, stillness feels like suffocation. If you've never felt that, you won't get this. And for that, there was Cain, a snake. Danny's closest thing to a brother, a counterpart to his dragon, yin to yang. That pairing is never quiet. Cain was a heavy influence, and through a Chinese Zodiac lens, it makes perfect sense. A snake with a dragon is volatile chemistry. The snake doesn't shove. It nudges, whispers, suggests, points toward temptation, and lets the dragon do the charging. That's how it always works. He pushed Danny toward chaos and stepped back. And when chaos arrived, he vanished, every time. Then when things settled, he reappeared, like clockwork. Cain, the snake, was never there in the storms. He was always there in the calm. And when it got too calm, he'd stir something up. A ripple, a disturbance, a karmic shove. That's not evil, that's function. So the city didn't need to seduce Danny. It just had to exist. And here's the part people usually overlook. It wasn't just B that Danny walked away from. It wasn't just his home. Danny didn't just stumble into a relationship. He stepped into responsibility for the first time as well. He met B when he began his first job. They both worked in a corner shop together. There was limited employment in the village. Danny lived, so the closest town is where he ended up working. Proper responsibility, customer service, showing up on time, learning how to speak to people without posturing, how to stay calm when someone's rude, how to read a room, manage tone, de-escalate without backing down. Social skills that weren't about dominance but confidence. That's a whole different kind of strength. And then there was the work with her family. The burger van, long days, early starts, cash flow, stock, logistics, travel. Watching how a small business actually runs when there's no safety net and no excuses. Learning by doing. Being trusted because someone needed it done right. That's how builders are made. This wasn't theory, this was practice. By the time he was 18, he'd already picked up 3 tool sets without realizing how rare that was. Most people don't get one that early. From the Traveler Dragon, he learned how to fight, how to hold ground, how to take pressure without folding. From B, the softer dragon, he learned how to live with someone. Routine, stability, shared space, keeping something ordinary standing, construction. And through work, he learned how systems function, how effort compounds, how structure creates safety, how reliability earns trust. Architecture, that matters more than anyone realizes. Because a dragon Capricorn doesn't just want intensity, they want coherence. This is where the work ethic comes from. The graft, the early responsibility, the ability to read hierarchy and slot into pressure points without complaint. Pressure doesn't scare him. Disorder does. The angry dragon, the loving dragon, the builder, all of it was already there, just not assembled yet. So when that life with B ended without drama, it wasn't because it failed. That's important. It simply ran out of tension. Everything was stable, predictable, calm. And for a dragon wired for pressure, calm doesn't feel like peace. It feels like suffocation. When the city appeared, it didn't corrupt him. It answered him. The city didn't turn Danny into something violent. It gave his nature room. He arrived already carrying the core traits of a dragon Capricorn. Pressure tolerant, hierarchically aware, instinctively strategic. Dragons don't stumble into leadership. They end up there when environments reward presence, decisiveness, and refusal to fold. And the city rewarded exactly that. Danny didn't posture, didn't swagger. He simply didn't move when challenged. There's a confidence that comes from knowing your internal architecture will hold under stress. That steadiness registered immediately, especially among outsiders, among people used to being prey. When harassment came, he responded decisively, not theatrically, not cruelly, just enough to draw a line. And lines invite alignment. People gathered around him not because he promised safety, but because he embodied it. Dragon leadership in its purest form, not charm, not manipulation, gravitational stability. This is how Spike emerged, not a mask, a function. Unlike Chuck, the underdog built to survive under other people's weight, this wasn't about being beneath anything or anyone anymore. Chuck learned how not to break, how to take the punch, how to stay upright while the world leaned in. Chuck was the punching bag. Spike was something else entirely. Spike threw the fucking punches. Spike was built from pressure, built for confrontation. Born to stand in the middle of chaos and not blink, he didn't just burn bridges, he brought the fucking inferno. This wasn't reaction. This wasn't fear. This was capacity finally given an environment that matched it. Spike looked at the external system, the people, the hierarchies, the threats, the pressure points, and understood exactly what it was. And he didn't just manage it. He could have burnt down the entire fucking city if there was even a hint of something getting in his way. But he didn't. He controlled the chaos. But dragon personalities have a flaw that only shows up at their peak. When control becomes proficiency, and proficiency starts to feel like destiny. Danny wasn't chasing domination. He was testing limitations. It was at this time Cody entered his life. Just the consequence of all the connections he was making. Except the universe chose her to be the mother of his first daughter. Momentum intersecting reality. And when she became pregnant, something inside recalibrated. He didn't really panic. He didn't flee. He showed up. That mattered. Because for a dragon Capricorn, responsibility isn't a burden. It's a claim. Proof that actions echo forward. That chaos can't just be survived anymore. It has to be contained. And that's when chaos changed shape. It stopped being about violence. It stopped being about dominance. It became about limitation, testing edges, learning constraints, figuring out how much force the world could take and how much it could carry before something broke. Inside, everything was fractured. Knowledge without shelves, wisdom without order, emotion bleeding into the air like whispers and screams carried off before they could settle. Nothing had place. Nothing had purpose. Everything preyed on anything it could find to survive. Figures moved in the internal wilderness, shadows, ghosts, old roles, drives and hungers roaming with attainment, desires and fears, regrets and ambitions, pride and shame, just a mess of raw materials waiting to be put together. And Danny wasn't ready to look yet. He wasn't ready to see. But the architecture had already begun. Danny was already creating perspective past normal capacity. Spike may have been conquering chaos externally, but the internal system wasn't creating anymore. It was building. Danny didn't know it yet, but all the noise, all the confusion, It wasn't random. It wasn't an episode. Spike was surviving. Chuck was healing. Danny was adapting. But the dragon was forging ground level, the sun rising with the moon, blueprints becoming foundations, linguistical seeds growing into a maze of persuasion, lines in the sand now permanent boundaries and unwavering principles, whispers becoming voices and shapes becoming company. Danny may not have even been aware of his role in any of this, but with no job, non-existent home life, lustful relationships, lacking commitment, and burning through chaos was exactly what kept him building. Danny had been involved with other girls before. He wasn't a stranger to female attention. As a dragon that comes naturally, and Spike wasn't bashful nor timid in the company of the opposite sex. By now, Danny had already begun gaining experiences and collecting knowledge on relationships. But this was different when she walked in. She didn't come to extinguish him. She came in sideways, water meeting fire, and the collision sent heat everywhere. Sideways. That's the bit. Not head on. Not a challenge. Fucking sideways. That little bird went straight through the layers, into the cracks, behind the leadership, behind the system builder, behind Spike, and saw Danny standing there still. That's the dangerous part. Not Spike. Danny. She wasn't intimidated. Most people are. She wasn't afraid. Most people pretend not to be. She didn't challenge him or threaten him. No posturing, no games. And that shook him more than violence ever had. Because violence makes sense. Because Spike was still the one in control. And violence became second nature. Of course it did. Everything Chuck had learned before, traveler brutality, pressure survival, instinctive dominance, found oxygen with Spike. Violence felt familiar, usable, reliable chaos. That's a phrase people don't like, but it's real. Everything Spike was learning right now, leadership, mercy, limits, integrity, respect, intimidation, capabilities, cause and effect. That's not a thug. That's a commander. It was necessary. The idea of calm, of something soft, welcoming, stable, didn't suit Spike because calm had already betrayed him once. It provoked him. Stillness had already proven it could suffocate. The dragon needed chaos to chase. Nothing was harnessed because Spike couldn't tame chaos if it wasn't wild. And you don't need to control a broken horse, only the wild ones. He had left any stable employment behind him. The city paid him now. Different economy, different rules, and the streets demanded his attention, gave him purpose, gave him power, but not without consequence. Nothing worth having comes free. Weekly run-ins with authorities, predictable. Clashes with public and self-declared rivals, inevitable. Interdynamic shaping and changing. That's the bit nobody sees. More and more responsibility bestowed upon the dragon's back. Pressure stacking. Thriving in chaos. Burning his foes and himself, whether he knew it or not. But his little bird was a monkey in the Chinese Zodiac, almost above it. She knew Spike, but she saw Danny. That's the difference. That's everything. And when Spike returned home after a day of torching enemies, she offered him calm, invited peace, inspired rest, a place to put the armor down, which to Spike felt too safe, the opposite of chaos. And that's where Red entered. Not as a plan, not as a decision. As such, as motion. Fucking momentum. She didn't offer reflection. She didn't offer containment. No peace. No calm. No breaks. She offered chaos, and chaos will always be Spike's native language. She pulled him away without asking, simply by moving, by accelerating, by matching the velocity Spike needed to stay in control. You don't have to drag someone who's already leaning forward. It's physics, just a shift in gravity. Because when Spike was running the show, motion always felt safer than truth, and Spike was still the one in control. Remember that. You don't need psychology for this. You don't need poetry. You don't need hindsight. You just need honesty. You just need to understand how the pieces move. That's it. The monkey offered intelligence, warmth, compatibility, a place to rest and be still, to reflect, to meet as equals, real, deep, rare. That mattered. Don't ever minimize that. But Spike wasn't built for rest. He was ready for real. Different kind of real. He was built from chaos for chaos. He created chaos, controlled chaos, and he was good at it. And when that dragon was at peace, when he was with that monkey, Spike still needed movement. Peace felt like a trap. And that's why the rooster came in. The rooster doesn't smooth the dragon. No, it pokes it. Sharp, loud, directional, confrontational without apology. It doesn't offer safety. It offers stimulus. It challenges authority, pecks at pride, dares the dragon to move, to react, to prove something. The monkey says, "You can sit here, stay, rest, recover." And Spike, still running the show, was never going to choose rest. Not then. It wasn't that the monkey lacked fire. She had plenty. She just didn't feed the right one. She didn't escalate him, nor did she destabilize him. Didn't give Spike something to fight, nor give Chuck a reason to run. She didn't create chaos, and that was the problem. Red. The rooster did. Not because she was better or worse, not because she was right or wrong, but because she matched the velocity Spike needed to stay in control of chaos. Speed recognizes speed. Chaos recognizes chaos. Always has. And compatibility only matters when someone is ready to be met. Most people aren't. Spike wasn't. So the rooster crowed. The dragon answered. And the monkey, for all her intelligence, depth, and quiet power, was left standing just outside the blaze. Not burned, just not inside, not rejected, just mistimed and slightly misplaced. Timing is everything, which is important here. This was mistimed and misplaced. Spike didn't leave in an inferno. She could always keep the fires burning cool. Instead, they made a promise. That's a quiet kind of power. And this is important, because the promise was the beginning of a monkey-dragon friendship that created the thread that held them together. The thread of peace and harmony. A long thread, stronger than people think. And at that moment in his life, Spike didn't want peace or harmony. He wanted heat. He needed fire. And fuck me, didn't he create it? Things escalated fast, burned and reforged. That's a forge, not a collapse. Not just out there, not just in the streets or in other people's lives, but inside him. New conflicts, new pressure points, fresh fractures tearing open old seams, lessons carved in heat, knowledge earned the hard way, more reasons to harden up, every scar doing work. Spike adapted, grew, learned, fueled by motion and consequence. Cain the snake hissing in one ear, Red the rooster crowing in the other. That's a fucking soundscape. And now there was a child in the equation. Danny's daughter. Fuel added to the fire. Everything changes here. The external system Spike had built started folding in on itself. Chaos inside chaos. His focus diverted. Too many variables. Too many forces pulling at once. You can't outrun physics forever. That's when he learned the difference between chaos you orchestrate and chaos that doesn't answer to you. Spike could dominate wars he started, but chaos that wasn't his, that shit didn't bend. And that's when it tipped. The exact moment. Because chaos doesn't stop just because you're good at it. It multiplies. It feeds itself. One spark becomes 10. 10 become a blaze. The pit fills faster than you expect. He was the storm. And storms don't choose direction. And he didn't see it coming, but something had already shifted. Not a decision. Not a plan. The world lining things up quietly in the background. This is how it always happens. Not just to burn bridges, to burn the whole chapter down. And it didn't come through Spike. Of course not. It came around him. Through timing he didn't choose. Through movements he didn't control. A series of unfortunate, unpredictable events. Through the world doing what it does when someone runs too hot, for too long, without ballast. And this is where you feel it, right? Because nobody plans this bit. Nobody fucking volunteers for it. This is just momentum finally slamming into a wall. Spike didn't lose. He didn't fold, didn't collapse, didn't suddenly become small. He was stopped. And that's a different thing entirely. That's the universe putting a hand on your chest and saying, nah, mate, that's far enough. And when the world says enough, it doesn't negotiate. And then the noise fell away. No followers, no supporter, no gravity pulling people in. Gone, just like that. All that pull, all that heat, all that attention evaporated. And even Cain the snake disappeared. Chaos doesn't need a whisperer once it's fully loose. Snakes don't hang around once the fire is already out of control. The system evaporated. Years of motion, pressure, hierarchy, names, reputations, fucking poof. And what was left was a cage. Steel. Concrete. Lock and key. A prison on remand. Not even sentenced yet. Not even a story arc. Just held. Just containment. For the first time, the chaos had nowhere to go. Nowhere to burn. Nowhere to discharge. Nowhere to spill. And for the first time, the dragon couldn't move. And if you don't understand how violent that is to a dragon, you're missing the whole point. Everything that had been external collapsed inward. Pressure forced to sit still. Noise forced to echo. All of it bouncing back inside his own skull. The dragon wasn't slain. No heroic death. No blaze of glory. It was locked down, restrained, paused, cornered. And that's where it starts to sink in. Slowly, painfully. For the first time, all the chaos had resulted in one thing: total confinement.